Hello all. Thank you for joining us again and allowing us to make art with you today. Today we'll be discussing the history of our chosen artist and then creating a piece of art that symbolizes that artist's best work. Today we will be discussing Faith Ringgold, an African American artist, civil rights activist, and author born and raised in Harlem. When Faith was young, she was raised around the epicenter of African American artistic culture, having been exposed to the back end of the Harlem Renaissance. She grew up mere blocks away from iconic black figures in art and culture such as Duke Ellington and Langston Hughes. It was during this time that she discovered an interest in art. Being born with asthma, visual art was her safe space, learning to sew and weave from her mother indoors. It was during childhood that she would see and experience the racism, poverty, and segregation that would influence her works for years to come. For over 50 years, Faith Ringgold has used her experiences growing up in Harlem to astound and amaze us with iconic and groundbreaking pieces made up of a variety of different mediums, from painting to quilts to sculptures, writings, and even performance art. She has received numerous accreditations and accolades throughout her life, earning over 80 individual awards and being awarded 30 honorary doctorates from prestigious colleges and universities. For our lesson today, we will be discussing her quilting specifically and thinking about easy, do-it-yourself ways for us to make quilt-like pieces at home. In the mid to late 70s, Ringgold was primarily a painter in the traditional sense, working with structured prepared materials like stretched canvas. After a life-changing trip, Faith began to think outside of the box. She looked to create quilts using sewing techniques she had learned growing up and painting techniques, combining the two, which at the time was unheard of. We will be looking at two iconic pieces today that she made during this period. The first, which she made with her mother, was called Echoes of Harlem, a piece that represented her own experiences of listening to her mother's stories of how quilt making got their ancestors through slavery, bringing the viewer into her world of family, roots, and breaking down structure. The other is called Tar Beach 2, which depicts a memory that Faith has shared with us about her upbringing, laying on the tar rooftops with her family in Harlem, enjoying her summer nights. When you look at her pieces, what elements stand out to you? What in these pieces do you look at first? What draws your eye? What about her work makes you think she decided to put her paintings on a quilt? What makes quilting so special to her? So now I ask you this. What are some fond memories or traditions that you have with your family? What about a story of your ancestors? Think about something that you and your family hold dear, be it a family trip, a memory of a holiday, or something that just makes you smile when you think about it. This memory, this tradition, is what we would like you to create. We are now going to gather some materials. You're going to need something to write or draw with, some coloring materials, and some paper. You will also need some old magazines or wrapping paper, some glue, and some scissors. If you don't have some of these materials, no worries. We can always adjust. Now what we are going to do is draw a rectangle in the middle of our paper, making sure that we leave enough room for a nice sized border around the rectangle. Now inside this rectangle, draw that memory, this tradition, this concept. Make it look as lovely as you can. I'm sure it'll turn out beautiful. Now, if you are finished with the drawing portion of the project, why don't you go ahead and make it colorful? Color in the work with whatever you want. Now remember, if you don't have colors, it's totally fine. Think about how that memory made you feel and try to express that with whatever material you have. But if you do have color, don't mind what the actual colors in the memory are. Use colors that express how you felt in that memory. Maybe it made you warm, maybe the memory is cold. Use colors that correspond with those feelings. Trust me, it'll look better in the end when you look back at it. If you have magazines, look through them and we will cut out quilt squares, or square images of things, words or colors that relate to your drawing. You guessed it, it's going to go on the border that you already drew on your paper. If you find that you don't have magazines, make a border around your rectangle of these little squares. Inside of these squares, what you should do are draw things that correlate or relate to the memory or idea inside of the rectangle. Almost like, you guessed it, a quilt. Remember, the thing about these works is they're expressions of you. It can be narrative, it can be abstract, as long as it relates to the memory. Maybe it's not an image per se, but a color, shape. Maybe try even drawing a smell. Now, if you do have magazines, scissors, and glue, we will have you cut out your squares and glue them to the border of your piece. Another interesting idea, if you find yourself with all of these tools, is to perhaps cut up your drawing. Make it into little squares. Maybe switch up the squares. Make it a little more abstract. Remember, it's your own version of your own quilt. As long as when you look at it, you understand that it is a memory. Maybe it's something that if someone else who shares that memory with you saw, they would feel the same way. If you're finished, take a minute, look back at your piece. Do you see a correlation between what you've created and what Faith wanted to portray in her work? I'm sure what you made is just as beautiful. Thank you guys for sharing your creativity with us. Cherish that piece you made. I would do more research into Faith Ringgold's life, as she has definitely done her part to make this world a better place for all of us. I personally love to look at work that another artist has made and incorporate their inspiration into my own work. Even if it is a completely different style, you never know what kind of tricks you can pick up or what kind of work will inspire you to create. I hope you had a great time making art with us. See you next week.